You know that peaceful, contented silence you get when you're truly, deeply happy. Yeah, me neither. They say money can't buy happiness. Well, as someone who's had a fair bit of it for the last 50 years, I can tell you that's a load of nonsense peddled by people who've never flown first class. Money can't buy happiness, but it can buy you a private seat on the flight there, a champagne flute that never seems to empty, and the blissful ignorance that comes from not having to worry about the credit card bill when you land. My name is Walter Thorne, and I have been, by any measure, spectacularly, delightfully, and unapologetically rich. Not new money, flashy car loaded. I'm old money. The portraits of my ancestors look judgy loaded. My late wife Beatrice, my brilliant, beautiful Bee, and I built an empire from a single hardware store. We didn't just sell nails and hammers, we sold security. We sold dreams of a finished deck, of a treehouse for the kids. And people, God bless 'em, bought it by the truckload. Thorne & Son became Thorne Home and Hearth, then just Thorne Enterprises. We were like a friendly neighborhood octopus, with tentacles in property, manufacturing and investments so stable, they make the Rock of Gibraltar look a bit wobbly. And the perks? Oh, the perks! I have a wine cellar that makes sommeliers weep with joy. I have a car so quiet I can hear my own joints creaking over the engine. I have a housekeeper, Maria, who has been with us for 30 years and still looks at me like I'm a child who's just tracked mud on her clean floor. I don't own a single pair of socks with holes in them. That, my friends, is the true mark of success. But here's the thing about a gilded cage. It's still a cage. The bars are just shinier. You see all this stuff, it attracts a certain kind of attention. Specifically, the attention of my 3 children, Lawrence, Penelope, and Clara. They don't see a father, they see a final boss at the end of a video game, guarding the treasure chest. Lawrence, my eldest, talks about legacy and estate planning, with the grim determination of a general planning a siege. Penelope views my bank account as her personal, inexhaustible arts fund. And Clara, well, Clara is the quiet one. She brings me homemade soup and asks about my blood pressure, but her eyes are always calculating, always assessing the inventory. They orbit me like well-dressed moons, their gravitational pull directly tied to the size of my portfolio. They remember my birthday with extravagant gifts I don't need, paid for with the money they expect to get back one day. It's an investment, you see, a long-term, high-yield investment in their future. Beatrice, she was my compass. She knew how to handle them, how to love them without letting them consume us. She'd squeeze my hand under the table when Lawrence started in on stock options and say, "Walter, pass the potatoes, your legacy is getting cold." Without her, the silence in this big, beautiful house is filled with the sound of their expectations. So while I sit here in my library, surrounded by first editions I've actually read and sipping a scotch that cost more than my first car, I've come to a realization: all that glitters is not gold. Sometimes it's just a very attractive lure. And I've decided it's time to see what's really swimming in the water when the lure is taken away. The game, as they say, is afoot. So you've met the king of the castle. Now, allow me to introduce my royal court. Or, as I like to think of them, the seagulls from that movie, constantly squawking, "Mine, mine, mine." First, there's Lawrence, my eldest. If a spreadsheet and a tie had a baby, it would be Lawrence. He's the CEO of his own life, and let me tell you, the quarterly reports are bleak. He runs part of the family business with the warm, personal touch of a parking meter. He speaks in corporate jargon so fluently, I'm surprised he doesn't dream in bullet points. His idea of a heartfelt conversation is a PowerPoint presentation on maximizing familial ROI. He's married to Emily, God bless her. Emily is a free spirit. She's into crystal healing, Reiki, and talking to her plants. I'm pretty sure she's trying to manifest a new Mercedes. She wafts through life in flowing linen, smelling of patchouli and unfulfilled potential. The two of them together are like a hostage negotiation between a Wall Street broker and a meadow fairy. It's as confusing as it sounds. Then we have Penelope. My daughter, the drama queen. Penelope treats life like it's a red carpet she's perpetually being dragged down. Her emotions are always dialed up to 11. A broken nail is a tragedy. A lukewarm latte is a personal betrayal. She's been married and divorced more times than I've had hot dinners, each one leaving her with a larger alimony and a smaller piece of her sanity. Her current career is, well, it's influencing, which as far as I can tell involves taking pictures of her brunch and being deeply offended by the world. She's a hurricane in designer clothing. And then there's Clara, my youngest, the reliable one. On the surface, Clara is the antidote to the other two. She's married to a nice quiet teacher named Ben. They live in a sensible house in a sensible neighborhood. She brings me casseroles. She asks about my doctor's appointments. She remembers my favorite brand of cookies. She's the portrait of modest, grounded stability. But you know what they say about still waters. I've always had a niggling feeling that Clara's sweetness is a little too perfect, a little too rehearsed. While Lawrence and Penelope are openly circling, Clara is the one sitting quietly in the corner, watching, waiting. She's the chess player, while the other two are just playing checkers. While Lawrence and Penelope are openly circling, Clara is the one sitting quietly in the corner, watching, waiting. She's the chess player, while the other two are just playing checkers. And then there's the ghost at the feast, my Beatrice, my brilliant Bee. She was the real brains behind the operation, the one who could see 3 moves ahead of everyone. She's the reason we're here, and her absence is the reason I'm about to do what I'm going to do. So, that's the family. A corporate shark, a socialite tornado, and a quiet cookie-baking enigma. A real-life soap opera, and I've got the best seat in the house. The only thing missing is the dramatic plot twist. Well, don't you worry. Daddy's about to provide one. For months, it had been building, a slow, steady drip, drip, drip of avarice that was slowly eroding my sanity. It wasn't any one thing, you understand. It was a symphony of selfishness, and I was being forced to listen to it on loop. It was Lawrence casually leaving a brochure for a luxury, full-service retirement community called Shady Oaks on my desk. Shady Oaks. It sounded less like a retirement home and more like a place you go to be quietly murdered by a nurse named Helga. He'd pointed out the round-the-clock medical care with the same enthusiasm most people reserve for a root canal. It was Penelope, weeping over a $5,000 handbag she simply had to have for a gala, lamenting that her allowance just wasn't stretching far enough. Her allowance. She's 42 years old. But the real masterpiece, the pièce de résistance of pure, unadulterated gall, happened last Tuesday. They were all over for dinner, a monthly torture session I endure out of a sense of morbid curiosity. Lawrence was, as usual, holding court. "Dad," he'd said, slicing into his steak with surgical precision. "We need to discuss the future. The structure of the trust is inefficient. We could be leveraging those assets more effectively." Penelope had nodded, for once in agreement with her brother. "Yes, and my interior designer said the Palm Beach house is looking terribly dated. It's an embarrassment. We need to completely overhaul it if we're going to be seen there next season." I just chewed my food, saying nothing. But then Clara, my sweet, reliable Clara, spoke up. "Lawrence is right, Dad. It's about security. For all of us, maybe it's time to consider signing over power of attorney? Just to simplify things. You shouldn't have to be burdened with all this financial noise." She said it with such genuine concern, her eyes wide and innocent, but the words were a cold knife. Power of attorney. They weren't just circling the treasure anymore. They were trying to pick the lock on the vault while I was still inside. That was the moment the last straw landed, and let me tell you, it wasn't a straw. It was a whole bale of hay. I looked around the table at their faces, Lawrence's calculating gaze, Penelope's petulant pout, Clara's mask of caring concern, and I saw them for what they were. Not my children, but shareholders. And I was a CEO who was failing to deliver the dividends they felt they were owed. That night, after they'd left, I sat in my study, swirling a glass of amber liquid that cost more than their first cars. I wasn't angry anymore. I was curious. A scientist presented with a fascinating, if morally bankrupt, experiment. What were they really made of? If you took away the money, what would be left? Would there be anything resembling a family, or just a pack of rats fighting in a suddenly empty grain silo? The decision crystallized in my mind, cold and clear. I would give them what they wanted, or rather, I would give them the exact opposite. I would pull the rug out from under their perfectly manicured feet. I would announce that the golden goose was not only dead, but it had died penniless. It was time to cancel the show. And the best part? I was going to sell the tickets anyway, just to watch them scramble for a refund. Gathering the vultures was easier than I expected. I simply sent a text, "Family meeting, tomorrow 4 p.m., urgent financial matters." I could almost hear the simultaneous pinging of their internal cash registers from across town. They arrived right on time, a parade of barely concealed anticipation. Lawrence, sharp in a suit he probably billed to the company. Penelope, draped in something flowery and expensive, smelling of entitlement and Chanel No. 5. Clara, in her sensible cardigan, a look of mild, practiced concern on her face. And Emily, Lawrence's wife, wafting in behind him in a cloud of patchouli, probably hoping the urgent matter was a group meditation session. They arrived right on time, a parade of barely concealed anticipation. Lawrence, sharp in a suit he probably billed to the company. Penelope, draped in something flowery and expensive, smelling of entitlement and Chanel No. 5. Clara, in her sensible cardigan, a look of mild, practiced concern on her face. And Emily, Lawrence's wife, wafting in behind him in a cloud of patchouli, probably hoping the urgent matter was a group meditation session. I had set the stage perfectly. The lights in my study were dim. I sat behind my large oak desk, not in my usual comfortable armchair, but in the stiff, imposing leather one, the throne of bad news, as Bea used to call it. I had a single, untouched glass of water in front of me. Theatrics, you see, are everything. They settled into the plush chairs across from me, a jury waiting for a verdict. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment, thick and heavy. I cleared my throat, a soft, weary sound. "Children," I began, my voice a gravelly whisper. I saw Lawrence lean forward slightly. "I don't quite know how to say this." I paused, looking down at my hands, which I had clasped tightly together to suggest a slight tremble. "It's all gone." The silence that followed was more profound than any I had ever paid for. The initial stunned silence in my study didn't last long. It was like the calm before a particularly nasty storm. The first crack of thunder was Lawrence. He shot up from his chair, pacing behind it like a caged tiger. "This is unacceptable," he snapped. His corporate cool completely evaporated. "There must be something we can do. Legal action against Bernard. We'll sue him for every penny." "He's already fled the country, according to his assistant," I said with a weary sigh, feeding him the prepared lie. "Vanished, like a ghost. The business is insolvent. This house, the vacation home in Tahoe, they'll have to be sold to cover the remaining debts. There's almost nothing left." Lawrence ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a gesture of pure panic I'd never seen from him. "The assets, then. We need to move fast. We can preempt the bankruptcy courts. I know a guy who can move the commercial properties quickly, maybe get 70 cents on the dollar if we act now." I watched him, fascinated. He wasn't thinking about me, his ruined father. He was thinking about salvage value. He was already conducting a corporate fire sale in his head, and I was the burning building. Then came Penelope's monsoon. The whimpering escalated into full-blown theatrical sobs. "My life is over," she wailed, collapsing dramatically against the back of her chair. "Do you know what this means? I'll have to give up my membership at the club. I'll have to sell my Birkin. I might have to get a job." She said the word job with the same horror one might say leprosy. She turned her tear-streaked face to me, not with compassion, but with accusation. "How could you let this happen, Daddy? You were supposed to be smart. Beatrice would be so ashamed." Ah, a low blow. But I merely bowed my head, as if accepting the truth of her words. Through it all, Clara was silent. She had retreated into herself, her arms crossed tightly. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring at the Persian rug, her brow furrowed in deep, intense thought. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but strained. "Are you sure, Dad?" she asked. "Are you sure everything is gone? What about the offshore accounts?" I almost smiled. Of course Clara would know the terminology. "Gone, sweetheart," I said softly. "All of it. It seems Bernard was more thorough than any of us could have imagined." Her face fell, a mask of disappointment so profound it was almost comical. It wasn't the disappointment of a daughter concerned for her father's well-being. It was the disappointment of a strategist whose best-laid plans had just been napalmed. Emily, ever the ethereal clown, tried to lighten the mood. "Perhaps this is a blessing," she offered, her voice dreamy. "A cleansing fire. We can rebuild, but with positive energy this time. I can smudge the house with sage." Lawrence whirled on her. "For God's sake, Emily, not everything can be solved by waving a bundle of weeds around," he barked. The bickering started then. It was petty, it was vicious, and it was the most beautiful music I'd heard in years. They were turning on each other, their true ugly colors bleeding through the polished veneer. Greed, fear, and desperation were now running the show. And I just sat there, the picture of broken dignity, watching my family's true nature unfold in glorious high-definition color. The unraveling had begun, and it was even more entertaining than I had hoped. In the days following my grand announcement, my quiet, spacious house became a stage for the most riveting, unscripted drama. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a frantic, desperate energy. They weren't grieving a loss, they were scavenging the wreckage. Lawrence was the first to make his move. He showed up unannounced, a structural engineer in tow, a shady-looking character named Vince with a toothpick permanently lodged in his mouth. "Just having Vince here give the place a once-over, Dad," Lawrence said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Need to know the true value before the bank assessors get their grubby hands on it. Gotta maximize what little we can salvage." I played my part perfectly, nodding along with a dazed expression as Vince tapped on walls and squinted at the crown molding, probably mentally calculating the price of the copper pipes. What Lawrence didn't know was that my own security system, which he'd always mocked as paranoid, had captured a fascinating audio clip from the driveway. He was already selling my memories out from under me. It was so perfectly predictably Lawrence. But Penelope, oh Penelope, provided the day's true comedy. She arrived in a flurry of silk and hysterics, claiming she was there to comfort me. Instead, I found her in my bedroom, her large designer handbag gaping open on the bed, clumsily attempting to stuff my late wife's jewelry box inside it. We stood frozen for a moment, caught in the act. Her eyes were wide with a deer-in-the-headlights panic. "Daddy, these are so fragile. I thought they'd be safer with me." In all the chaos, her voice was a shaky falsetto. I looked from her guilty face to the half-hidden velvet box. "Safer from whom, Penelope?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "The bankruptcy lawyers, or me?" She burst into a fresh wave of tears, this time seeming genuinely ashamed, though likely more from being caught than from the act itself. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. My image is everything. I can't be seen wearing last season's pieces." I didn't yell. I just took the jewelry box from her trembling hands and placed it back on the dresser. "Your mother loved these," I said quietly, the genuine sorrow in my voice now cutting through my performance. "They're not part of your image. They're part of our history. Now I think you should leave." She fled, sobbing, her attempted heist a complete failure. Watching them, a cold clarity settled over me. This wasn't just about greed anymore, it was a sickness. Lawrence saw everything as a line on a balance sheet, to be liquidated. Penelope saw everything as an accessory, to be possessed. They were picking the carcass of the life Beatrice and I had built, and they didn't even have the decency to wait for it to stop breathing. But through it all, one question lingered in the back of my mind, a quiet, persistent hum beneath the noise of the others' theatrics. Where was Clara? While Lawrence and Penelope were busy setting the world record for most predictable betrayal, Clara was playing a different game entirely. She didn't call for 3 days, no frantic texts, no desperate visits. It was radio silence, which, in this family, was the most suspicious behavior of all. When she finally did show up, it was with a warm homemade lasagna. Not a casserole, a lasagna, the kind that takes hours to make. She didn't wear her usual sensible cardigan, but a soft, comforting-looking sweater. Her expression was one of gentle concern, a perfect mask of filial devotion. We ate in the kitchen, a stark contrast to the dramatic scenes in my study. She asked about my sleep, my appetite, if I needed anything from the pharmacy. She was the picture of a dutiful daughter, but her eyes, those calculating eyes, were taking in every detail of the house, as if she were a appraiser for Sotheby's. After we'd cleared the plates, she poured us both a cup of tea and got down to business. "Dad," she began, her voice soft and reasonable, "I've been thinking, this house, the upkeep must be a nightmare for you now. The property taxes alone." She let the sentence hang, watching for my reaction. I gave a non-committal grunt, playing the overwhelmed old man. "And with everything that's happened," she continued, leaning forward, "it's not safe for you to be here alone. What if you fell again? What if there's an emergency?" She placed her hand over mine. It was meant to be a comforting gesture, but her grip was a little too firm. "Ben and I have talked. We want you to come live with us." I almost choked on my tea. Live with Clara, her quiet husband Ben, and their 2 rambunctious boys in their 3-bedroom suburban box. The thought was more terrifying than bankruptcy. She saw the hesitation on my face and pressed on. "It would be tight, of course. We'd have to convert the basement. But it would be safe. We could take care of you." Then came the kicker. "And it would free up this house. We could sell it quickly, get it off your hands. One less thing to worry about." And there it was, the gambit. It was so much smarter, so much more insidious than Lawrence's brute force asset stripping or Penelope's clumsy theft. It was a brilliant move. I had to give her that. I looked at her, my sweet, reliable Clara, and saw the cold strategist beneath the surface. She wasn't just playing chess while the others played checkers. She was playing 3-dimensional chess in the dark. I patted her hand and gave her a frail smile. "That's a very generous offer, Clara. Let an old man think about it, would you?" She smiled back, a perfect, practiced curve of the lips. "Of course, Dad, no pressure." But the pressure was there, hanging in the air between us. The quiet one had finally made her move, and it was the most dangerous one yet. After Clara left, the house felt different. Her offer, cloaked in concern but lined with cold calculation, left a chill that the dramatic tantrums of the others hadn't. I needed a win. I needed to feel Bia's presence, to be reminded that not everything in this family was a transaction. I went up to the attic, a place I usually avoided. It was a time capsule of our life together. Under a layer of dust, I found her old writing desk. My heart ached as I ran a hand over the smooth oak. I opened a drawer, half expecting to find a forgotten love note. Instead, my fingers brushed against a thick, leather-bound ledger I'd never seen before. It was labeled in B's elegant script, "Contingencies." My breath caught. I carried it downstairs to my study like it was a holy text. Inside, it wasn't filled with numbers, but with notes, observations, and warnings. Page after page of Bia's sharp, insightful mind at work. Lawrence's ambition blinds him to ethics. Must ensure he cannot access core capital. Penelope's fragility is a weapon she uses. A trust must be structured to provide stability, not fuel for whims. Clara watches. She listens. She is the most like me, and that is what frightens me. Her kindness has an agenda. I felt a jolt. Bia had seen it all, decades ago. She had known the flaws in our children better than I did. And then I found it, tucked in the back, a single typed letter from her, addressed to me. It was dated just a month before she died. "My dearest Walter, if you are reading this, the worst has likely happened, or you've finally gotten curious enough to snoop through my things." I could almost hear her laughing. I've never trusted the sharks on Wall Street or the ones in our own family, so I took matters into my own hands. Years ago, I began siphoning a portion of our profits, a rainy day fund, I called it. It's not in our name. It's held in an irrevocable trust, managed by my old friend Frank Abbott. The details are with him. It's not a fortune, my love, but it's a cushion. It's our screw you money. Use it if they ever try to put you out to pasture. All my love, forever B. A screw you fund. Of course she did. My brilliant, magnificent bee, she had built a lifeboat for me without my ever knowing. I immediately called Frank, a retired, notoriously grumpy banker B had adored. He confirmed everything. The fund was real, healthy, and completely untouchable by anyone but me. Bernard, the corrupt financial manager, had never managed it. He hadn't lost it because he'd never known it existed. But Frank had more. Walter, he said, his voice gravelly. When B set this up, she made me promise to keep an eye on things. I've been doing my own digging since your financial troubles began. The trail Bernard left, it's messy, but it doesn't add up. The money didn't just vanish into bad bets. It was moved. Systematically, over years. The room seemed to tilt. What are you saying, Frank? I'm saying, he said slowly, the embezzlement was real, but Bernard wasn't working alone. He had help from someone on the inside, someone with intimate knowledge of your finances. The pieces, the horrible, jagged pieces, began to snap together in my mind. Lawrence's frantic salvaging, Penelope's desperate theft, Clara's quiet, probing questions about offshore accounts and blind trusts, her perfect, timely offer to take control. The investigation was no longer a game. A real crime had been committed. And the prime suspect was the one person I had almost begun to trust. Frank Abbott, God bless his grumpy, meticulous soul, is the kind of man who keeps records in triplicate and trusts no one. Over the next week, he fed me information in hushed phone calls, each one chipping away at the facade of my family. The embezzlement was a work of art, a slow, patient bleed over nearly a decade, small, unauthorized transfers from various accounts, cleverly disguised as administrative fees, investment losses, or phantom tax payments. Bernard was the scalpel, but someone had to be the hand guiding it. Someone who knew the rhythms of our finances, who could anticipate questions and provide plausible answers. Frank had traced a series of these transfers to a shell company, which then funneled the money into a private educational trust. Not for Clara's boys, no. This was for a C. Thorne attending an exclusive private boarding school in Switzerland, a school with tuition that could choke a racehorse. Clara, my modest, sensible Clara, the one who drove a sensible car and lived in a sensible house. She had been funding a secret, lavish life for years. The money was for her. C. Thorne was her. The quiet, unassuming one was living a double life, a fantasy of European luxury paid for by the family she pretended to care for. The final piece of the puzzle was her husband Ben's secret. Not a gambling addiction, but a debilitating chronic illness his teacher's insurance wouldn't fully cover. Clara wasn't funding a vice. She was funding a desperate, hidden life of medical bills and an escape fantasy, all while playing the part of the humble daughter. The depth of the deception was breathtaking. Lawrence and Penelope were amateurs, playing in the shallow end of greed. Clara was in the Mariana Trench. I knew what I had to do. The performance was over. It was time for the final act. I called them all one last time. The text was simple, my study. 5 p.m., final decision on the estate. They arrived like obedient soldiers, their faces a mixture of hope, anxiety, and greed. Lawrence and Penelope immediately started sniping at each other, a preview of the battle to come. Clara stood slightly apart, her hands clasped, the picture of serene patience. I didn't sit, I stood before them, the ledger from Beatrice in my hands. The performance is over, I said, my voice cold and clear, cutting through their bickering. They fell silent, confused. There was no catastrophic loss. Bernard didn't lose our fortune. I let the words hang in the air. Because my brilliant wife, your mother, saw you all coming from a mile away. I held up the ledger. Beatrice created a secret, untouchable trust years ago. A screw you fund, she called it. I am not broke. In fact, I am perfectly comfortably secure. The reactions were glorious. Lawrence's jaw went slack. Penelope looked like she'd been slapped, but Clara just stared, her serene mask cracking, her eyes widening in dawning horror as she realized the game was up. But her ledger held more than just a safety net. I continued, my gaze locking onto Clara. It held warnings about all of you. and it prompted a real investigation into what did happen to the money Bernard was supposed to be managing. I took a step toward Clara. It was you, Clara. For years, you and Bernard. You've been stealing from us. From me. To fund your secret account, your secret life, to pay for Seathorn's little Swiss fantasy. The blood drained from her face. Dad, no. Don't, I snapped, the full force of my fury finally unleashed. The shell company, the educational trust, Frank has it all. You weren't concerned about me moving into your basement. You were concerned about getting me out of this house so you could get your hands on the last big asset to cover your tracks. I looked at Lawrence and Penelope, who were staring at their sister in stunned disbelief. You two were petty, greedy, and pathetic. But she, I said, pointing at Clara, she was a criminal, the wolf in a cardigan. The room was utterly, profoundly silent. The master manipulator had been out-manipulated, and the look on her face, the shock, the shame, the utter defeat, was a more satisfying revenge than I could have ever imagined. The fallout was swift, silent, and absolute. There were no more screaming matches, no more dramatic pleas. The truth, laid out so coldly and completely, had sucked all the air out of the room. My children were no longer vultures. They were statues, frozen in their own private hells of shame and consequence. I laid out the new terms, my voice flat and devoid of the warmth they had long since squandered. Lawrence, Penelope, you will receive a modest, fixed monthly stipend from a trust. It is enough to live on, but not enough for the life you feel entitled to. There will be no lump sums, no bailouts. Your access to the family and to any remaining goodwill is now conditional upon you actually acting like decent human beings. One more scheme, one more attempt to manipulate, and the stipend ends, permanently. They didn't argue. They just stared at the floor, the fight gone out of them. They had lost. Then I turned to Clara, the wolf. As for you, I said, the words feeling like ice on my tongue. You are to be removed from all family trusts and documents. You will receive nothing. Furthermore, you have 1 week to return every cent you embezzled into your Swiss account to Frank Abbott. If the full amount is not returned, I will be filing a criminal complaint. I have all the evidence. You will face prosecution for grand larceny. She didn't look at me. She just gave a single sharp nod, her face a pale, tear-streaked mask of utter ruin. Her perfect secret life was over. Her reputation was ashes. Her own family now saw her for the thief she was. They left my house that day not as a family, but as strangers bound by a name and a shared profound failure. The great Thorn inheritance battle was over. There were no winners, only varying degrees of loss. In the weeks that followed, a strange peace settled over the house. The phone didn't ring with their concerned calls. No one stopped by unannounced. The silence was no longer lonely. It was clean. It was the silence of a battlefield after the war has ended. I sat in my study, the real one, not the staged one, and thought of Beatrice. Her Screw You fund wasn't just money. It was her final act of protection, her way of ensuring I had a choice. I didn't have to use it for myself. Instead, I used it to build a fortress of consequences around my children. I've decided to use the bulk of B's fund to endow a charitable foundation in her name, the Beatrice Thorn Foundation for Second Chances. It will help people who've genuinely fallen on hard times, not those who manufactured their own. It feels right. It turns her legacy from one of wealth into one of grace, something my children could never comprehend. Am I happy? No. How could I be? I look at my life and see the wreckage of the family B and I tried to build. But I am free. The gilded cage is gone. The performance is over. I am just Walter again. An old man with a quiet house, a few good memories, and the bittersweet knowledge that the greatest inheritance B left me wasn't the money. It was the courage to finally say, enough. The silence lasted for a solid month. It was a deep, healing quiet, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the satisfying rustle of turning the pages of a book I actually wanted to read. I didn't hear a peep from Lawrence or Penelope. I didn't expect to. Their stipends had been deposited, a silent, humbling reminder of their new place in the world. As for Clara, the money was returned in full, a wire transfer from Frank that spoke volumes in its cold numerical finality. The threat of prosecution had been a potent motivator. I thought that was the end of it, that the curtain had fallen on the Thorne family drama for good. I was wrong. The doorbell rang on a Tuesday afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door to find Emily, Lawrence's wife, standing on my porch. She wasn't wafting in her usual linen clouds. She was wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt, her hands shoved in her pockets. She looked grounded. "Walter," she said, her voice soft, devoid of its usual ethereal lilt. "Can I come in?" I was so surprised, I just nodded and stepped aside. She followed me to the kitchen, where I'd been about to make a pot of coffee. "I'm not here for Lawrence," she said preemptively, as if reading my mind. She sat at the table, her posture straight. "I'm here for me." I grunted, gesturing with the coffee tin. She shook her head. "The revelation. It was a wake-up call," she began, choosing her words carefully. "Not just about the money, about everything, about the life I was living." She looked around my kitchen, really looked at it, as if seeing it for the first time. All the crystals, the sage, the manifesting, it was all just a performance, a way to pretend I wasn't married to a man who saw people as assets and liabilities. I stayed quiet, pouring hot water over the grounds. The rich, bitter aroma filled the room. When Lawrence lost his mind over the money, I saw the real him, the man without the suit and the spreadsheet, and I didn't like him, Walter. I was terrified of him. She took a deep breath. "I've left him." I nearly dropped the coffee pot. Of all the outcomes I had imagined, my hippie daughter-in-law growing a spine was not one of them. "I'm staying with a friend," she continued. "I got a job, a real one. Waitressing. It's hard, and my feet hurt, but the tips are mine. The life I'm building is mine." She finally looked me in the eye, and for the first time her gaze was clear and steady. "I guess I just wanted to thank you." "Thank me," I sputtered. "For blowing up the family?" "For telling the truth," she corrected gently. "You showed everyone exactly who they were, and it gave me the courage to finally see who I could be. I'm not a meadow fairy. I'm a 40-year-old woman who can carry 3 plates at once without dropping them." A genuine laugh, rough from disuse, escaped my throat. "Well, I'll be damned." We sat for a while in a comfortable silence, drinking our coffee. It was the most honest conversation I'd had with anyone in my family in years. She wasn't asking for anything. She was just connecting. After she left, I stood at the door, watching her get into her beat-up sedan, a far cry from the luxury SUV Lawrence had leased for her. She didn't look back. It was a strange, small epilogue to the whole sordid affair. In my quest for revenge and self-preservation, I hadn't just exposed the rot. I had, entirely by accident, given one person the tools to break free. It didn't fix the hole in my heart where my family used to be, but it did plant a single stubborn seed of something that felt an awful lot like hope.